It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Hadassa Horowitz. Your maiden name was Fishman. And Hadassa, you were born in Halberstadt in Germany.
Yes.
What year were you born?
1927. Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about your family and the roots, your parents and your grandparents?
The roots are, yes, my mother, Oleya Sholom, was born in Bochnia, Poland, Galicia, but she and her parents left there to move to Nuremberg, Germany, at the age of 2. So I would say she was very Germanized or Yekischized. And whereas my father, Lobashom, was born in Pietrikov, that was Poland, and he lived in Poland till he was 17 years old. And then via Vienna, ended up in Halberstadt somehow. I'm not sure how that worked. And I, no doubt through a shidduch, my parents met. I don't know that history. I only know that they got married in Germany. They lived in Halberstadt, which is where I was born. And primarily, all my experiences in Germany were in Berlin, where my father transferred to the firm Hirsch und Sohn, Hirsch, Kupfer und Sohn, and he worked there as an executive. And so I only know German life from the year, I guess, 1927 to when I left in April 1939.
If we can go back, you have a picture of your mother's parents.
Yes. So these are my mother's parents, last name Wolf.
They came from a very religious family.
Yes. And so now I have to look for my father's parents. Here's my father's mother, and here's my father's father. Here, wait, I have it together. These are the Fishmans. My mother and my father. Right. Okay, so my mother's parents, as I said, lived in Nuremberg. And so I was already moved to Halberstadt after my parents got married. So I first want to say my father's parents lived in Auschwitz, which turned out to be Auschwitz. And my father's parents had, this is all prior to the war, of course, had a lumber yard in Auschwitz. And they neither of those grandparents, lived to see the Shoah. They died before the Shoah. And coming back to my mother's side from Nuremberg now, I don't know much about them because my grandfather died before I didn't ever meet him. And my grandmother, regrettably, left Nuremberg and went to Poland to be with my mother's sister and perished there. So what are we up to now? Where have we come?
There's a picture of your parents.
Yeah, you held that up already. You want me to hold it? I should hold it.
And this is a picture in Berlin?
Yes, in front of our house.
What type of work did your father do?
He was, it's complicated, he was an expert in insurance for ships. I can't tell you more. What I understood, this is already in America where he did the same thing for the Bentheim Company. Ships were brought in and out for the business, and these ships were obviously insured. And I remember my father going down to the docks when there was a strike in the New York City docks, and he was not afraid of these guys, real thugs really, and said the strike must end because we're covered this way, otherwise the company over there is going to spend a fortune in what you call it, I guess pizzuim, I don't know how to call that, in punishment, you know, for being overtime. And things like this, which are dramatic, but in actuality, he doesn't normally have to do that. He just did all the stuff by mail. Everything was in those days done by snail mail, you know. There was no such thing. Oh, and this is a picture, a rare picture of my mother before she was married. She is the center young lady in the front. I just love their hats.
And did your parents ever mention why they moved to Berlin?
Yes, the company called. My father was working for, I guess, he must have been working already for Hirsch, yes. And Hirsch and Sohn moved to Berlin, so he moved to Berlin. That's why. Yeah, that's your answer.
And Hadassa, can I ask, what are your earliest recollections, your earliest memories?
Well, we all lived, Berlin did not have private housing. You lived in an apartment house. So we had a very nice apartment, large, the standards compared to even New York, but Israel for sure, the rooms were huge. Every one of the rooms were huge. And we had a balcony, and we lived with it was a mixed house, namely two families were Jewish and the rest were not Jewish. And we lived rather, I would say, peaceably with them, not friendly, but peaceably with them. We were the Orthodox family, and the family that lived higher up on another level was a Reform Jewish. And I went, this is the real memory that I have of school. I went to what is called Hadassa Horowitz Berlin, a religious Jewish school formulated on the basis of Hirsch, for Hirsch's philosophy of Torah Mada, so to say. And we learned, it was an excellent school. It was a school that had amenities like a music room and a gym, which, was early education, early on good education. We had good teachers. Are you asking me to go into the war years?
No, what you remember before the war, growing up?
Yes, it was very a very good life. We went to the shul that was attached to the school, which was, Rav Munk was one of the rabbis. Rav Hildesheimer was one of the rabbis. And I attended, these are postcards. They're not my pictures, but they are very indicative of where I lived.
And the name of the shul, do you recall?
Yes, it was, like I said, it was the same name that the school was. Yes.
So here's a picture of the shul.
I remember crossing that bridge. Yeah.
And your family were very very Orthodox.
Yes, they were what I would call today, in Hebrew terms, chadal. But in English, I don't know how to translate that. Very from Zionistic. And I wouldn't even say that my father was a flag-waving kind of Zionist. No, but he supported when the beginnings of the history turned into allowing a land for the Jews via Balfour Declaration, etc. So the Jews that were interested in Germany started collecting money, and they put out also bonds. And I know my father bought one of the first bonds there were at the time. So, and I remember them going to what was then called Mizrahi dinners and stuff like that. So at the same time, they were very halachically oriented family. So that instilled in me, I guess, the desire to come.
So here you have a picture when you were 6?
Yes. Yes.
And Hadassa, did you have siblings?
I had one brother.
Was he older or?
Older. He was older, but he had 4 years. Eli by name. Eli Fishman, who was a wonderful, very beloved brother. This is my father. And this is me at 10 and a half.
And growing up, you had a very happy childhood.
Very happy childhood, very happy. This is a non-Jewish nanny that I had when I was, I guess, the picture looks to me like I'm 5 years old, I think.
And here we have a picture going back even earlier.
Yeah. Well, that's I told you too. But that was a very short period in my life because my mother was sick and my father didn't know what to do with me. So
you two at the time?
Yes. And as soon as she felt better, I went back home. So that was really a very short period. And
do you have any, you were too young to have recollections?
Of this? No, I have no recollection of the early picture.
What is your first recollections that you have?
Being on a little tricycle and riding around in my living room. That's my first recollection. Flensburger Straße. So I know the street name. But that's not where I lived ultimately. My address was I was just thinking about it today. It was so knocked into my head because I guess my parents felt that if I got lost, I should know where I live, that I remember exactly Berlin Nordwest 87, Hansa-Ufer Nummer 2. Now, this is a recollection from me of 90 years and more. But I must have been told this every day. Remember where you live. with that address, yes.
You've never forgotten it?
Never forgotten it, so. And never, earliest recollections, so we lived a very nice middle class kind of life, which allowed us to have vacations in Czechoslovakia, in the Hohen Tatra. That's what it was called. And we also visited my grandfather, who lived in Auschwitz, which was no great joy, because Auschwitz was a real, this is all, you understand, it's all before everything.
So it
was a muddy, unpleasant little tiny town. And I came from Berlin, which was the metropolitan kind of, and I arrived dressed to the teeth. My mother dressed me in little white socks and patent leather shoes, and I had this sailor hat and gloves. I had gloves, and my cousins who lived there came in Hasidic garb, which is, that you couldn't have seen that in Berlin. There wasn't such a representation. I had never seen anything like it before. And they wanted to play with me, and they used only spoke Yiddish. But Yiddish and German is not terribly far apart. And I learned to play with them very nicely. And my grandfather, the lumberyard person, had, it sounds very grandiose, but it wasn't all that grandiose, but he had a train on his, you might call it estate, in terms of being large, not being gorgeous, but large. There was a train, and you can imagine cousins and trains. We jumped up and we jumped down, and we spent the whole day doing nothing but jumping up and down. And the trains were really for logs, tree logs, and he was transporting them from one end of this estate to the other end, and then they were loaded onto what you would call, what do they call it? A kutsch. I don't remember what they call it, horse and buggy. And my grandfather was part of the drivers. He drove together with somebody who was strong. Yes, so you're asking about my recollections.
It's amazing.
Those are my summertime recollection of my grandparents. My grandmother was not alive. So it was like my grandfather didn't know what to do for me, the cute little girl from Berlin, but he had no way of approaching children. He wasn't very at ease with children. So he loved me madly, and he hugged me too tight, and I was not any too satisfied. But we were there, I think almost every summer we spent some time there. So those are my recollections of Auschwitz. And not pleasant, because I didn't like the place, but not for any reason other than that it was just an 1800 kind of thing instead of 20th century.
And how did you travel? Did your father...
Train.
You went by train?
The fact of the matter is, Berlin was not all that far from the border with Poland. I don't remember the time. It could have been more than I think. But from the station, the train took us to a certain spot, and from there we hired a horse and buggy driver to take us to my grandfather. So I don't know how, I wouldn't know the timing really. But I had a lot of fun, but it wasn't a place for me to stay too long. And I described to you my school, a very good school, with very modern approach to education. I'm still grateful to it. Yes, and yes, well, then we are coming to the... You have any more questions?
We have a picture of your brother.
You have one here?
Yeah.
Oh, when he was young.
When he was young.
Yes, well, I don't know if we have an older picture of him. That he was very young there.
And at school, did you have also, did you make friends with all the other children easily? You had a...
Well, they were all from the same background as I was. No, there was a difference, and most of them were German Jews from... They could show you their documents 500 years back, German, and we weren't. So there may have been a little bit of a distance, but I don't recall it. And I went to that shul, the same as they did. And by the way, all my life I went to Friday night shul as well as Shabbos morning. That's how I was brought up. Friday night you go to shul, and the women went.
And do you remember who the rabbi was?
Well, as I said before, Rabbi Munk was one rabbi, but he was the later rabbi. We had a previous one. I think it was Hildesheimer. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But from the school, we had... I did once know that I didn't remember. Schlesinger, that was it. Schlesinger was the dean of students in my school. Yes.
So here we have a postcard of the school and the Achenbach Bridge with the school building on the right.
Mm-hmm.
And were there happy days at school? You were happy going to school?
Very happy, yes, very happy.
So Hadassa, this is a picture with you and your
cousin Fanny
and your father.
Yes.
And this is in Berlin.
Yes.
And here's a picture of your family with your brother. The original picture. And in the background it's a suburb where you stayed, where you lived.
Mm-hmm.
You can see your brother's wearing short pants. It's the real...
Yeah. And it tells you actually 1939.
This is just before you left.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just going to go back a little bit earlier here. I think you were a bit younger.
Mm-hmm.
This is the original picture.
It looks to me like I'm in the country. It says so here. Country, in the country.
And this is when you went on holiday.
Yes.
And you've got very fond memories of going on holiday.
And it says 1936, so we even know when.
And here's you with a friend.
This is 1938.
And this is when you're on holiday in Czechoslovakia.
Yes.
And the name of the town was... You
It's
even have
in
it
the
on
back,
in the back.
on the postmark, but I can't read it.
It's Tatra.
Yeah.
And here's a lovely picture of you.
Yes, it is a lovely picture of me. School picture. Oh, you wanted it like that.
And then
That's what I can help you with.
And this is in 1938, a picture
Let me make sure that you got that right. That's, you have me there with the girl, with the other girl, but this is a bigger picture of me. Yeah, you want us?
That's wonderful.
Okay.
But the picture of all of you in 1939, just before you left.
Yes. Yes.
So, can I just ask, do you remember, this is just the most amazing picture, do you remember when the Nazi party came to power?
Sure.
And you remember the marching in the streets?
Yes, I do.
And the swastikas?
I remember the song.
I
remember the song they sang.
Do you know how it goes?
I know it begins, SA marschiert, die Reihen festgeschlossen. That I remember. Very frightening. Very, very frightening to a little girl. You know, very frightening. And also I remember when my parents started to say, you can't say anything we talk about at home outside of the house. And that was really knocked into my head. And it frightened me. And I once was in the street when they marched right next to me, past me, with the boots and the belts and the whole equipment. And I think it really traumatized me. And I didn't fully understand the significance. I don't think anybody really knew what was happening or what was going to happen, certainly. But it's not for his not expressing exactly what he wants to do. He told exactly what he wants to do to the Jews, but nobody believed it.
He wrote it in Mein Kampf.
Yes, he wrote it, everything, if you really wanted to read it or know about it. And people just didn't believe it. Yes, so, but the atmosphere began to be very restrictive as of, to my memory, as of 1936, let's say. Doctors were the first. You couldn't go to anyone but a Jewish doctor. Then you couldn't go to any grocery but a Jewish grocery. Then you couldn't, but after that the school began to be tremendously overcrowded because Jews could no longer attend non-religious, non-Jewish schools, which meant that from my class of, let's say, 20 students, we suddenly had 50 students. The teachers could no longer teach in anything but Jewish schools, and there was a limit to how many teachers we could take on. So we got new teachers, but everything became very, very tension-filled. I certainly felt it. I was a child, so you can imagine grown-ups felt a great deal of tension. And then, oh yes, well then came October 38, and October 38, and the Nazis knocked on our door, and two came. I opened the door, actually, and they said, they told me that I have to get my father and my brother. And I ran to the bedrooms and I yelled to, I said, there are two guys here. So my father understood right away that they were taking him away. And he told, this I could tell you. He told my brother, take a warm winter coat, take a toothbrush, and take your tefillin. My brother must have been about 15 then, and my father, but they didn't take me or my mother, because in Berlin they didn't do that. In other cities they did. And they dragged him into a truck, and that was the end. We did not know where they were. And I would say 3 weeks later, we got a card from my father that said, don't worry, we're well. And we are in Zbunchyn. I don't know if you ever heard of this. Zbunchyn was a very small town just exactly across the border from Germany to Poland. And apparently they took between 10,000 to 15,000 people that way. And they were left on barren grounds and thrust over there, and under very difficult circumstances. People died of diphtheria because there was no proper toilets, etc. And so they built, as far as I heard, they built things for themselves. They bribed the Polish guards, which you could do at that time still, to get this and to get that. And I know there was a whole educational system going on. But as far as we were concerned, left rudderless, you could say, in Berlin, things were, as I said, extremely tense. Schools closed, so I was home all the time. We would get from the police every day, every single day from the police in our mailbox, appear before the police commandant to explain why you're still in Germany. This was like a small time in the war years, before the war years, where they decided suddenly they want Jews to leave. And nobody could leave because nobody had a visa. Nobody had a visa. Who equipped themselves with visas? So I was sent out to do many chores that grown-ups really do, because ein brera, as they say here. So one of the places I was standing in line for is in front of consulates to get a visa. So we were all in a long line. Everybody got a chance to talk. And I thought, I thought not so long ago, maybe I dreamed the whole thing, until I looked at our passport, and stamped in the passport is a visa to Thailand.
Thailand?
I got a visa to Thailand. That I did get, and for my mother and me. And you know what? We were ready to go. What could we do? We didn't know what to do. We didn't know where my father was or my brother. And it looked like we were going to get killed. Every day got worse and worse and worse and worse. Well, in the meantime, we got that count for my father, so we knew that he was not, ill or anything. And that's when they approached my mother about the kinder transport. And I always think about it, already my mother prepared me. She put in things that she thought were the most important things. And she had my whole list of where I was born and who I was written out. And it was the same suitcases that, God forbid, you see today piled up high in Auschwitz area. And I had that kind of a suitcase. And then she decided that she can't make such a big decision by herself. And she sent a telegram to this place, Bunjin. And my father sent back a telegram, and he said, I don't allow it. We're either all going to go together or we're not going. And now I don't know whether you could call that a prophetic vision that he had, or that it was his firm resolve that we were going to get out together. But it was a risk he took, because it could have gone the other way. And in the last minute, my mother said, give the spot to somebody else. And they were going to send me, as I told you, to Belgium. And so here we were, but we didn't go, we didn't do that. And we sort of, we tried to sell our furniture because we had no money. We didn't know how to everything was frozen, all the money, everything was frozen and taken. So we were in quite a bad shape, and we left our apartment and moved into a one-room place in a Jewish home, not far from our shul, but the shul was closed. So we were all, those who were left behind, those Polish, Jewish, that's what, maybe I didn't make that clear.
Because they were
because they didn't have German citizenship. And so those were the people who were being picked up. And as my father said many years later, it was our saving that he was taken away, that he left Germany, and that from there you will see. This is the last story I'm telling. It's getting too long.
No,
but I will tell you that as we were in this one-room apartment, a room from renting from a lady who had an apartment, there was a knock on the door. And of course we were always so frightened at all the knocks on the door. But what could you do? You had to open the door. And I opened the door, and there stood a stranger, a man. And my mother came to the door, and he must have spoken German. But believe me, I don't remember that. But I will tell you that he came from England, and he said to my mother, "Where's Mr. Fishman?" My father. And she explained to him what happened. And he said, "I heard in England that things for Jews are very bad. And when I didn't hear from Mr. Fishman, with whom I used to have constant business correspondence, I started to worry about him. And I was so impressed by your father, your husband, that I felt obliged to come and see myself what's wrong." And turned out to be a non-married goy, non-Jew, who just took a liking to my father and got worried about him. He came all the way from London to see what happened to him. And he said it took him a long time to find us because we had moved away from the apartment. And he said, no, what you tell me is horrifying. And I will get you certificates to go to Palestine. Oh, my mother, thank you very much, my mother said. And he took down the address where my father was. And he said, "I want to see your husband in where he is." And we didn't believe a word of it. It all seemed like, not real. But it was real, because this was, my father was taken away October. Let's say this was in January. No, it was closer to Pesach. It was like maybe April, maybe early April.
This is 1939.
And we got the certificate in the mailbox, and we opened it up, and it's a real genuine certificate. And he went to see my father in this Sponshin place. Can you imagine such a thing in Poland? And he got him, and he wanted to give for my brother too. But my brother was not there anymore. My brother was taken out of that camp by Rabbi Schoenfeld from England, who wanted to save young kids. And he was on the list to take him out. So my brother ended up in England. But my father got the certificate, and we left.
So this is the picture before your father and your brother were taken to Spungen.
Right. Yes, it was still good times. It can't be, it must be mislabeled.
Yeah. Can I just ask, do you remember the name of this person from England? The man
His
from
name
England?
was Brown, and we tried very hard to get together to do something good for him. But he must have been, we figured, he was killed during the Blitz because we couldn't get a hold of him. We couldn't find him. We couldn't do anything for him. Nothing. Brown was his name. Can you imagine finding a Mr. Brown in London?
And he came, it's just the most amazing story.
It's like, I used to call it Eliyahu Anavim. Yes.
And your father, they used to do business together?
They were strictly correspondence via mail because they never even saw each other. I know, it's a wonderment.
That's incredible.
Yes, yes. But you know, every Jewish story like that has some hint of an S.
And
every story.
Hadassa, can I ask you, when your father and your brother were taken, and they were in no man's land because Poland didn't want to accept the Jews either, so they had to stay in the border between Germany and Poland.
Yes.
It was a terrible situation.
Yes.
Do you remember Kristallnacht, which
Sure.
happened in
I do
November?
remember Kristallnacht, yes.
November the 8th and the 9th.
Yes, I remember.
What is your recollections of Kristallnacht?
I do have, of what? What
happened?
Well, as far as I know, my shul was not burned down. And there was a reason, I found out much, much later, that very near to my shul, there was some kind of a factory that produced explosives. And they didn't want to burn it down. They were afraid the whole neighborhood would go. So my shul was not I told you that we couldn't go to shul already for a long time. I remember, yes, I was sent out for a dry cleaner, and my mother sent me out to get something back, and that man was dead. I came into the store and he was there. I still saw him. And they had a big sign outside, Judah. So that was enough for me. I remembered that.
Is this the first time you ever saw somebody who...
Yes, it was the only time I ever saw that. Yes, but that was the Kristallnacht. Yeah, they didn't so much at that time. I don't think killing was like a common thing. It was, harassing and doing terrible things and ruining the stores and all that. That was really Kristallnacht. And they called it that because they broke all the glasses and the shul's beautiful chandeliers and all that sort of thing. But there wasn't that too much. Look, I was a little girl. I could only go so far. How far could I walk?
Do you remember seeing the other shops the glass being broken? Or?
No, I don't remember it. I know it was there, but I don't remember it. So.
And as a child, do you remember the Hitler Youth marching?
Yes, you asked me already. I told you that I remembered them with the belts and the boots and the singing. And, it was a very frightening scene. And when he made speeches, there were hordes of people. I mean, thousands were listening, and all dressed in these uniforms. It was like he swept the country, and anyone who didn't join was, ostracized or eventually driven away. You didn't really, as a young person, have a choice not to join the Hitler Jugend. And I guess to most of them it was very appealing. It empowered, 18-year-olds, what they are like. They're always searching for something. And he gave them a course.
Did you ever see the motorcade? Did you ever see...
I don't think I remember that. That was in the heart of Berlin they did that because there was space. I mean, I lived in a neighborhood where it was normal streets. It wasn't big enough to allow for but I saw them marching. Yeah. So I can't really tell you much more.
And the neighbors that you had, the non-Jewish neighbors?
Oh, they were terrible.
Do you remember them
Terrible.
changing? Or
Terrible. Yes, terrible.
in what way were they terrible?
Well, they spit on us, and
Your neighbors?
Yeah, and we had, what you would call a super, and she used to be on the best of terms with us because we paid them a lot, a lot of tips, because she helped us for Friday night and Shabbos to do this, that, and the other. She knew all about it. And as soon as Hitler came to power, she was so disgusting to us. She said, "We'll report you, we'll just get you out of this house," and stuff like that. Yeah.
And did you have any non-Jewish friends in the neighborhood?
No, I never did.
Were there children your age around? In the building?
My friends came from the school.
But in the neighborhood where you lived, with the non-Jewish children, were they similar age as you? Did you have other kids that...
Well, I'm sure there were,
But you weren't
I was
friendly?
never friendly with any of them, no.
And your brother, did he have a hard time as well?
Well, he went with my father, and then he went to England, as I told you. And in England, he ended up in the Gateshead Yeshiva. Why are you surprised?
It's incredible that
Yeah.
Rabbi Schoenfeld, what he did.
Yes.
He's
yes.
an unsung hero, Rabbi
Yes.
Schoenfeld.
Yes,
Rabbi
yes,
Schoenfeld.
yes, yes.
When your father was released, or when Mr.
Yeah.
Brown,
Oh, we met, if you want to know what happened.
very much.
Yeah, he took a ship out of Gdynia, Poland, to Haifa. And we took a ship out of Trieste, which is a whole story unto itself. We took the ship out of Trieste to Haifa, and that's where we met.
So your father never came back to Germany?
No.
You never met him back in Germany?
No. And not only that, that little moment where the Germans wanted you to leave, they also said, "But come back first and settle your business, and then you could go and leave." And my father, he told me, he got on a podium in Sponschien, where he was sent, and he said, "Jews, don't go back to Germany. It's thrown you out. Don't go back. Don't go back. It's no good going back." My father never went back. He was agitating against going back to all the other people. And many of the people went back and were stuck.
This must have been... How old were you at this time when you went to Trieste?
Oh, so 11.
And do you remember leaving your... What about your family? Did you say goodbye to...
Well, the thing is that we were really almost the only family that settled in Germany. The rest of the family was in Poland. So there was nobody for me to say goodbye to. I had no cousins there, nothing. So I don't think I even said goodbye to anybody that I remember. I don't remember that.
And your friends?
Well, my friends were all in the same boat. There were many German Jews who felt safer than we did and thought that because they were Germans for so many hundreds of years already, they would be treated differently, but that didn't happen. And so they stayed later than I did. They didn't feel the urgency to leave as much as I did. I mean, you could almost say we were kicked out. My father was certainly kicked out with my brother, and it was all to the good that he was. That's the truth.
So Mr. Brown brought you the papers, the
He didn't bring
certificates?
him, it was sent to us.
And these were the papers that
These
you
were
got
the
the certificates
papers.
to enter
These
Palestine?
were the papers that saved us, yes. Yeah.
And he organized it?
Obviously. I know very little, if anything, about him, except that he was my father's counterpart in London. In other words, he probably also was in that line, like the shipping insurance line. And I know that my father used to say I can't write on the Sabbath and stuff like that. It impressed him. It impressed him. He was very impressed by my father. The whole thing is a big mystery. It really is.
Because I must just mention, the white paper that the British government imposed restricted Jews coming into Palestine, and these
I needed certificates.
They were so rare and it was so difficult to obtain.
Very much so. And when we did get to Israel, to Palestine at the time, we were housed.
I just want to ask you, before you got, how did you get to Trieste? They must have also been very difficult.
Very difficult.
How did you have money to go on a train?
We didn't have money, that's exactly right. So my mother had enough money for the ship trip for me and her. But she did not have the money to cover the train that led from Berlin to Trieste. And so we went towards the train, and on the train we found a group led by young 18, 20-year-old girls, and it was sort of a kinder transport group, but not to Europe, but to Israel, to Palestine. There were a lot of kids, many of them my age, and no parents. The madrichim were the only leadership. So my mother went to them and told them that I was there without a ticket, and that if they find me, they're going to take me off the train together, and my mother wouldn't leave me alone. She'd also go, and it would be sheer death for us. That's what she thought, and she would have been right. And could they please make believe I'm part of the group? And during the trip, when the control comes, they would try to hide me in the bathroom. And you can imagine that I was not happy. I knew all about this. I knew I wasn't legally on that train, and I knew how scared everybody is. And this madricha, she said, of course we'll do that. And that's exactly what happened. They put a girl in front of the bathroom while I was inside, and she made believe she's waiting because there's someone inside, and they didn't pursue it. They didn't look for me. So that's how I got on the train. For the ship, she had money. I don't know how she got the money, but she did.
And how did your mother stay on the train without a ticket?
No, she had a ticket.
Your mother had a ticket?
I was the only one that didn't have a ticket. She had a ticket for everything, and then not for me. And I guess it was safer, it was better for my mother to have a ticket. And they would have looked at her more seriously. In any case, we made it to Trieste, yes.
And how long did you stay in Trieste?
Trieste, we had to wait for the big ship, because we didn't come on a ship, obviously, we came on a train. And when we got to Trieste, I do remember, it was night. And the Jews of Trieste came out to greet us with hot chocolate and stuff, and food, cakes and whatnot. They were very welcoming. They didn't know what was waiting for them ever. So, who dreamt at that time that Hitler would just run over Europe? And anyway, the ship came, I guess, pretty soon, because I don't remember where we stayed. We must have stayed somewhere overnight. I don't remember where. And the ship was big to me. It looked like huge, like a house. It probably was pretty big. A ship like that has to go over the Mediterranean has to be reasonably big. And I had such a good time on that ship. I felt free for the first time. No mother, no father telling me what to do, because my poor mother was completely seasick from day one. And I was not at all seasick. I ran around and I'm telling you, we had all those kids came with me. Remember the ones from the train?
And did you make friends with those kids?
Yeah, sure. We were all in it together.
And Hadassa, in Trieste, did you go to the shul? They've got one of the largest shuls in Europe. Did you go to the synagogue in Trieste?
No.
They've got one of the largest synagogues in Europe.
But we were there overnight. That's
Just
about
overnight.
it.
But the community were very good to you.
Yes, very good. I remember that. You know, you're asking me what I remember. I remember getting hot chocolate and cakes. And it was all very exciting for me. Very. I saw it through children's eyes, you know.
Did you know that your father had already, that he was also coming?
Well, I knew that he got the certificate.
And your brother, you knew that he was in England?
I don't think they were able to communicate because maybe it was still before the war. I can tell you when we left. We left after Pesach, April 39. We left Germany after Pesach, April 39.
And the Pesach you had with your mother?
Oh, the Pesach I had with my mother in that one room, and we lit the candles under the table. We were so afraid that the Gestapo would see a light and come and do God knows what and schlep us away. And I remember that clearly, that we had a Pesach under the table.
Did you have matzahs? You managed to get...
I stood in line, another line for the matzahs. And Gestapo was constantly circling us, all the women, and taking pictures. So that was not very reassuring. It was scary. And we were very, very, mazel is not to say the word, Yad Hashem, that we got out. Yeah.
It's a miracle.
Absolutely.
The whole story is a miracle.
I agree with you. The story is a miracle. I would venture to say that everybody who escaped has a miracle story.
I agree.
Yeah. So that was...
and on the boat you made friends with the other girls?
Yes, I did. But they after we arrived, we were reunited with my father, and they never... The parents probably never saw the parents again, and they were taken to a kibbutz or somewhere, I don't know. So we didn't stay friends or anything, no.
We did the ship dock. Was it in Haifa or in Tel Aviv?
Haifa.
And you remember?
Tel Aviv, you can't take a big ship into Tel Aviv harbor.
They had a very small port, but you're right. Sometimes they would take...
No, they take you off and you go in little boats.
Yeah.
But no, this ship went to Haifa.
And do you remember seeing Haifa for the first time?
Sure.
And was it very emotional?
I didn't see Haifa. We never even stayed half an hour there. We reunited.
Your father was waiting for you?
Yes, he was there already.
How was the reunion when your mother and you went and saw your father?
Very emotional.
It must have been incredibly emotional.
Yes, very emotional.
You hadn't seen your father for...
Well, I would say half a year.
Half a year.
Yeah.
Had he changed a lot?
April to April. I don't think my father was a very strong man. I don't think he, I don't remember that he changed a lot. I think it was very hard on him in Palestine that he didn't have a job. And what they told him to do was ridiculous. They wanted him to climb on orange trees and collect oranges and put them in a basket. And my father was a gentleman who sat at a desk, and it was really not doable for him. And I think that he was dislocated by being in Palestine. But I, on the other hand, felt free and very happy to be there. And we ended up as I said, we didn't spend any time at all in Haifa. We reunited, and there was a plan which I was not aware of, where to go. And we were in a taxi driven by a Yiddish-speaking driver. And as soon as we left the area, he said in Yiddish, "When I tell you to lie down on the floor because the Arabs will be shooting at us." So my poor parents went from the, frying pan into the fire. And I was so excited because I looked out the window when they told me to lie down. I paid no attention. I looked out the window and I saw these Arabs with the whole kafia and all this. This was so oriental and so different to my life in Berlin. My goodness me, it was so exciting. And my poor parents, of course, were saying, "What did we do? Where did we get into it?" Anyway, we landed in the Tel Aviv, in Tel Aviv, which was a very small town then. And the British were running the show. And somebody arranged all this. I have no idea who. We were in one room assigned. We were assigned this room. And it was within a house that I think had 2 stories. And the interesting thing about that was, it was meant to be makeshift. We were meant to organize ourselves. But the interesting thing about that was that there were seemingly many rooms, I think maybe, not as many as I really remember, probably 4 or 5 other rooms, and like mine, a big room or without, with beds in it. And overnight, suddenly the next day, these people were gone. I was looking to make friends, and I don't think my parents were in a condition to look around for friends. They were busy trying to think, what shall we do? But I was open to that. And the kids were gone, the people were gone. And this happened 3 nights in a row before I said to myself, I'm going to stay up at night and see what's happening. And I was a witness. I have a long history being an old lady, of seeing many different things. So I also saw the mapilim. You know what the mapilim are? I saw them with my own eyes. That's why people kept changing overnight. They came with their boats on their shoulders because they already had taken people off.
The illegal Jews that came.
These were people who came illegally, and they came via small boats from a bigger boat in Tel Aviv that couldn't come closer. And they put them up in these rooms, and they had arrangements with them that the very next day they would take them somewhere, because you couldn't stay. We could stay because we were legal, but these other people were all not legal. And this was all done with all kinds of, what shall I say, machinations.
Because the British were very...
Oh, they were impossible.
They
were impossible.
They forbade immigration.
Yes, terrible, terrible. So I finally, I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I saw they were coming in the middle of the night, and the next day there they are next door to me, and the next night they're gone, So I saw what my parents slept through, I hope. And as I said, they didn't really watch me like they used to watch me in Berlin. I was like free. I could, do what mischievous kids will do. Yes. It was a very exciting time for me. And the ocean, we were between us and the ocean, there was nothing. There was no buildings, no hotels, no nothing. It was just pure sand.
This is in Tel Aviv.
In Tel Aviv. It was in '39. That's what it looked like. And so you can imagine that I ran in the sand and I ran into the water. And it was, well, but you don't know what my father was like. My father said, what do you mean? You're not going to run around like this. I will put you to school. And he ran to the Mizrahi school, which still today exists by the name of Moriah in Tel Aviv, and registered me. And so out was that. I couldn't jump around anymore the whole day. And I went to school there. It was not easy for me because that was an era where if you didn't speak Hebrew, they got angry at you. They were the Jews who had lived there before we all arrived suddenly, they were very nationalistic and felt that Hebrew is the only language to speak. And, well, you can't make somebody overnight know how to speak. So it was difficult for me. And, but I made friends there. I made friends because everybody was a refugee. Everybody was a refugee. Handful of people who actually lived there before. Yes.
And was it far away from where you lived, the school? How did you get to school?
I think I walked. I didn't use a bus or anything, no. And we ate off a Bunsen burner. That was our cooking. My mother had, can you imagine my poor mother, who was used to the nice, elegant Berlin home.
And at this time...
You know what a Bunsen burner is. It's like what you use for scientific experiments. And that was what my mother cooked on.
And had you heard from your brother at this time?
So I, do I remember that? I knew he was in England. So if I knew, my parents knew. I knew he was in England. And no doubt that my father tried to communicate with him via mail. And, but I knew he was, so to say, safe. And I think I knew that he was in that yeshiva. I think I knew that.
So he was in Gateshead?
Yeah. Yeah, it was hard for him. He had a hard time with the Sponschien part, and he wrote about it in German. As I go through all these things, I'm forcing myself to read what he wrote. It's not easy either. He had a very hard time. My father never talked about it at all, and he never talked about it. But I see in his writing how he felt. Yeah.
And how long did you stay in Tel Aviv?
Me?
Your family?
Half a year. That's it. My father wrote to a company in America, and there were people that he knew from his German company who had already emigrated to America and had established themselves. And he wrote to them and said he would like to have a job because here he can't make a living in Palestine. And do they have something for him? They were very eager to have him. I told you, it's a niche, a special niche that I guess not too many people were experts in. And they sent him an affidavit. Yeah.
And that's how you and your mother and your father went to America? That's how you traveled, you went to America?
Yes. I mean, he got, obviously for all of us, for the three of us, not for my brother. And I was only in Palestine half a year. I cried buckets when we left. I was so upset.
You didn't want to go?
No, I didn't want to go because I really liked it. Yeah. The Kotel didn't look like the Kotel of today.
And you went to Jerusalem?
I had a cousin 2 years older than I who said, you've got to go and see Jerusalem. So I went with her on buses and all. As I said, during the British protectorate. And I remember that the Kotel had this narrow alleyway that you had to almost squeeze yourself in to go to be close to it. And there were days they didn't want to let you in altogether. And she knew when to go. So I went. I don't think my parents went, but I went with this cousin. Yeah.
You know, it was forbidden to blow a shofar at the Kotel.
Yeah, but I wouldn't.
There were such restrictions.
Oh, terrible.
The British imposed unbelievable restrictions.
Yeah, well.
And you remember the British soldiers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's very sad because a lot of Jews could have been saved.
Oh, that's a terrible story, right? Yeah.
And which other family did you have in Palestine?
Well, I had actually my mother, Leisham, had a cousin that lived in Palestine already since the 20s. And then, yes, my mother actually is the only, she also had nephews. Yes, nephews. A nephew and a niece that lived the nephew lived in Jerusalem. And, but, you know, as I told you, we were sort of isolated living in Berlin from all the rest of the mishpacha. But, of course, you have mishpacha and you suddenly show up. You want to be in touch. And we did go to both of those cousin sets. I did anyway. I don't even remember about my parents. But I did a lot more travel than they did. I think they were sort of in a state of shock, I think. The heat got them there, and my father was forever planning, how do I get out to make a living and have a normal kind of job. And so they were, you know, they were not open to staying. And I, as a kid, you know, take me wherever you go. I'm glad to travel. I'm glad to, and of course the soldiers didn't do anything to me particularly. They didn't even scare me really because they didn't approach me or anything like that. And so, and my cousin knew her way around because she spoke a perfect Hebrew. And so I saw more than my parents at that time did. That's what really happened. So I went to this cousin. He had a pension, and I stayed a Shabbat with them. I remember that. And then another cousin had a chicken coop, I remember, because, you know, they lived here long before we ever came. And another cousin with whom I really did, to this day, have a good connection, lived in, you know, I have to take that all back. In 1939, when we came, I didn't know where they were. I didn't know anything. I'm talking about my visits after I was already married and came to Israel in 1968. That's when I met all those cousins.
But your cousin that took you into Jerusalem, into the old city?
That, yes.
What was her name, the cousin that took you?
Tzipora Wolf. She was from the Wolves.
And you had a connection with her all the years?
Yes, but she's not alive anymore.
And how was your reaction when you went to the Kotel? What do you remember going to the Kotel?
I remember, I vaguely remember the ride, vaguely, but I do remember being in the narrow area with this. Then closer you are to the Kotel, the taller it seems. It seemed like really tall, and no, I don't think I was awestruck because I was too young to put it all together right. But I was very happy that I went. I did all the right things. I said a tefillah, and I put my hand on the wall, and we didn't stay long.
Do you remember seeing the old city, the Horowitz synagogue? Do you remember?
No, I was only there at the court. I did, and she dragged me into going home right away. So it was a long trip for us, you know. This was 39, and the Arabs were really raging already, and was even not probably wise for me to go, but I went anyway. Yeah, not good times. And on top of that, it was the era of the tzina, where there was no food. And considering that, I think I ate okay, but I remember eating meatballs every day. That's what I remember.
And there were the Arab rights of 29. And
yeah.
There was Hebron, when it happened in Hebron.
But believe me, I think maybe my father brought a little money. I don't know, I don't know what, we must have lived on something.
But in Tel Aviv, there were a few German families already at the time in Tel Aviv.
German families?
That had come to Tel Aviv already. There were a few German
There
families.
were a lot of refugees.
Yeah.
A lot.
And did your parents,
did
they make friends with any of the other refugees?
Did they what?
Did they befriend any of the other refugees?
I don't remember that. No, I don't remember that. I think they felt totally dispossessed, and when you're in that shape, you pull into yourself. You don't go out from yourself. And don't forget, I was a child, so that was different. But they were adults that had big worries. Parnosa is a big worry, and safety is a big worry. And where's my son? How am I going to get together with him? It's a big worry. So adults have these heavyweight things on their shoulder. And I think had they stayed longer, it would have been different. They would have found people to be with. There were plenty of German Jews, you're right. Plenty of German Jews. I mean, the streets were filled with refugees. And most of them were not legal, unfortunately, So that's it. How much longer are we going to talk?
I just wonder, because it's fascinating. What do you remember of Tel Aviv? Did you ever go to Dizengoff or any Allenby Street?
Tel Aviv was an animated city. It was rather attractive, I thought. But I don't remember being in the streets. What I was in was I went from my house to the school. I played at the beach. And I didn't go into town. I think we lived in the heart of the city, actually. I think it was not, there wasn't much of a big city there.
And the synagogue, did you...
So the synagogue, you would think I would remember such a thing, but I don't. My father must have gone. There's no dearth of synagogues, and even then there must have been plenty of synagogues.
And when your parents told you that you got papers to go to America,
yeah,
how did you feel?
I told you I was devastated, really devastated.
And that trip you left from Haifa?
That trip, yes. You mean leaving? Leaving is another story. We left. The war had already broken out. It was already past September 9th or 1st. I think he invaded Poland.
Yeah, on September the 1st.
So the war broke out, and it became a little nerve-wracking. And we were, I would think, on maybe one of the last boats that left with passengers. And I'm pretty sure of it, because when I tell you why, because the boat we were on was a cattle boat. It was not meant for people. And the guy, to make money, he took on people. And how many could he accommodate on the top? We had to be on the top. We couldn't be with the cows. That I can tell you. And not only did it smell bad, but it was rocky. The boat was rocky because it was not a big boat. It was a small boat. It was only going to take us to Greece. It wasn't going to be the big ship. So it wasn't a big boat. And the cows, when there was a squall, they fell against each other. And you heard them mooing and mooing and mooing. And, you know, it was an experience to be on this boat. Now, here we go again. I enjoyed it, but I don't think my parents enjoyed it very much. And we landed in Greece. And it went from Tel Aviv to Syria to unload the cows. And then it continued.
From Haifa to...
Yeah. Haifa. And then it unloaded the cows, and then we were cow-free, and then we went from there to Greece. And so on the way, we encountered a submarine, a German submarine. And no, it wasn't, no, take it back. It was the other ship, the Greek ship that we were on. So anyway, we arrived in Greece, and I think it was a layover of a couple of days till the big boat was ready to take us. And I got the flu. And this was very bad because they weren't going to allow us to go on they thought, God knows what I have. We tried to get rid of my sickness by all kinds of means. And I remember I was in a hotel in Piraeus.
It's part of Athens.
Right, Piraeus. And the chambermaid snuck in behind my mother, and she did some kind of hocus pocus on me in order to chase away the flu. And my mother came in the middle, and she was beside herself. Well, nothing really happened, even though it was voodoo stuff. So I don't know, somehow they got me on so the big boat was called Nea Hellas. I have proof of that somewhere in the house. And it was a big boat, and it was going to go across the Atlantic already. So we were on that big, I will tell you the side story. But you really have to stop this now. The side story is my father, Shalom, gives you a little insight into the man. He said, I don't know, we're going on this big ship for such a long journey. It was going to be very long because in those days that took so long. I think 3 weeks. I have to know about the kashrus. Who's in charge there? What is going on? Is there anybody in charge? Can we eat anything? I will go to the rabbi. And my father, of course, knows as much Greek as you know. And he had it on a petek where the address of the rabbi is. And he took me along with him. And I went in all these little crooked little alleys. And the rabbi lived what I thought as a child. I thought, oh my goodness, he lives in a cave. It seemed like a cave to me, but I guess people live like that. He went and saw the rabbi, and he spoke to him. First he tried Yiddish, but this rabbi didn't understand a word of Yiddish. So my father spoke to him in Hebrew. My father's Hebrew was pretty good. Spoke to him in Hebrew, and they understood each other. And he walks out of there, and he says to me, "Ich nicht essen." After listening to what this rabbi had to say, he decided he isn't going to eat. But he had to eat something. "But you," he said to me, "and your mother, you can eat X, Y, and Z." Very restrictive kind of diet, but it would have been eggs, and potatoes and maybe vegetables. I don't know what he ended up eating. He didn't eat the bread. He lost a lot of weight because obviously he didn't trust this rabbi for anything. So then we went on this, so we did go on this near Hellas ship, and we survived the trip. Oh, that's when the submarine appeared. It was very scary because the ship was loaded with Jewish people going to America. And the captain demanded to board us. And the Greek captain said, "We are neutral and you are not coming." And they backed off. We were just very lucky. The submarine backed off. Yeah. Yeah, but not long afterwards they bombed Greece, so we were just lucky.
And they invaded Greece.
Yeah. So we were just lucky that was before that happened. And the Greek captain was very good to us, really.
And he knew that most of the passengers were Jewish.
Of course he knew. So anyway, we arrived in America.
What date did you remember? Do you know the date that you arrived?
I think it was January 40. I'm pretty sure about that. January 40. And the idea was that somebody was going to wait for us from the company and show us the way and all this. We arrived there, and it's Shabbos.
Oh, you're on
And
Shabbos.
here we come to my father again. And he said, "It's Shabbos, I'm not leaving the boat." So everybody got out, and everybody's looking at us. We're standing there with all our packages surrounding us, and my father is sitting there like this. That's a Buddha. I'm not going off. "What do you mean? When are you going to go up?" "When I see 3 stars in the sky." So we came down to the captain. The captain said, "Look, we've got to close up here. We're only going to leave a skeleton crew, but I'm going. I can't wait for you. Go, we'll manage." And we stayed till 3 stars. But the man who was supposed to get us did not stay. He thought maybe we didn't come. Everybody else was coming up. So there we were, and I don't know how my father did it. Really, I don't. I've thought about it a number of times. Where we were, I mean, he spoke English, but none of us did. And we have packages of galore, and we sit in. We landed in. Not in New York Harbor.
It wasn't Ellis Island.
What?
Not Ellis Island.
No.
Did you see the Statue of Liberty at all?
No. No, we saw the sky, if that's what you're asking. No, but we didn't land in Ellis Island, not at all, because again, we had all legitimate documents. We had no problem with that. And we were going to go straight to an apartment, but this man disappeared on us. We landed in a town that is not commonly mentioned, near New York, near New York City. But I even forgot exactly where it was, but I knew once where it was. And we stand there at the wharf, and somehow my father managed to get us to Manhattan, where we were supposed to go. And he knew the address, and he may have hired a taxi for all I know. January, Shabbos is out not late. It's not like it's midnight and you can't find it. So he must have done that. But he was like, really, honestly, how he did it, I don't know. And we arrived on 78th Street, West Side, where once again we had a one-room place where I don't know who arranged for that, but that was also meant to be very temporary. And from there on, I would say, from my viewpoint, maybe not from my mother's, she had to acclimatize again to something new, but my father went straight into what he knew, that business, which was called Philip Brothers at the time, and he did exactly what he used to do. And he knew some people there, actually, because those are the people who got him there. Those are the people who sent the affidavit. He knew people, and so he probably had an easier road.
And he knew English.
And he knew English, right. Remember, he corresponded with that wonderful man in English. That was all in English, you understand. Yeah. So that was our arrival. And
did you know any English?
Not a word. Not a word. And I know, and my father sent me out to buy a piece of bread. I remember this. I said, how am I going to, I don't know how to say bread or anything. He said, point. So I did. I pointed. He gave me some money, and I pointed. I bought bread. We weren't there long, but we actually went to the shul nearby, so we must have been there over a Shabbos. And I guess my father and mother went hunting for an apartment. And they went what they knew about, which was Washington Heights, which was set up by the German Jewish community. And Rabbi Breuer was the rabbi. And we found an apartment in that area.
And you stayed in Washington Heights?
Well, I stayed a lot, yes. I stayed till I got married, actually, in Washington.
And that's where Yeshiva University is?
Yes, and my father went to the little shul in the Yeshiva University. He didn't go to Breuer's. This suited him better, the Yeshiva University.
And you managed to learn English?
What?
Was it difficult to learn English? To learn English, to speak English, was it difficult? You?
For me? Oh, they put us into, the neighborhood was predominantly Italian. And the powers that be thought all the refugee kids need to be in a special class, and they called that the C class.
Was it a public school?
Yes, a public
There weren't Jewish schools?
Not really. Not really. Rabbi Breuer had an afternoon class, but not full time. So we were all, I'm telling you, we had a whole class of refugees. That was our special class. But, you know, Jewish kids are smart by and large. You don't find too many stupid. So it took us 3 months to learn the language. And then we were up to par, ready to learn anything else. And the school system had counted on us being there for years in this special class. And here we were, bursting at the seams, all knowing English, and saying, what are you doing here? I mean, we can't learn any more English. We already learned the English language. So they were in a kind of a dilemma. And I was in that class till graduation, I guess. Maybe not. Maybe we participated after that. We were like I don't know. apportioned in different classes. But in any case, I was with quite a few highly intellectual kids. I was not one of those, but I really rather enjoyed the social scene. At last, I was in my element with friends and this and that. And we had some very, very outstanding. They weren't, at the time, I didn't know what would become of them, but they eventually, I heard about them. They all became quite outstanding people. And that's our arrival in America.
And when did your brother join you, or did your brother join you?
Yes. My father did his utmost to get him out, but the war was full blown by that time. And he wrote to Senator Javits, and Senator Javits answered him and said, "I will do my best for you." He said, "I must be reunited with my son." And Senator Javits arranged it that my brother should be put on a troop ship that was taking American soldiers for R&R to America, and he was far from being a soldier. He was a yeshiva boy, and there he was amongst the many, and that was like, I don't know the dates. Let's say that we arrived, like I said, January 40. I think he came a year later.
And how was the reunion when you met your brother?
It was very, very, for me especially. Well, no, I shouldn't say. My parents must have been crazy about having him. But I was, as a youngster, I was very close to my brother. And you asked about change. He changed. He was not lighthearted anymore. He was a much more, what should I say?
Serious.
Really a serious person. Yeah, I was very sad about it. I didn't really recognize him. Not the person, I recognized him, but I didn't recognize the personality anymore.
It must have been so hard, him being in England by himself.
It was
not
hard.
Knowing what's happening
very
to
hard.
his family.
It was very hard for him. Very hard. Yeah. No, I think he knew we were safe.
No, but it's being alone. It must have been.
Yeah, we knew he was safe. He knew we were safe. But it was hard times alone in a yeshiva that was very, at the time, very Haredi. And I'm sure it still is. But it's lightened up since then. And there was no food. Britain really didn't have food. And the yeshiva boys were, neighbors gave them food, extra food. He did mention that. So he had a hard time, I think. And he came back it was this sponging thing that I think changed him. He was a very mischievous, lively, fun-loving young boy. And he came back when I finally did see him, a very serious person, yeah.
But you still could connect well?
Yes, we connected. He was very close to me.
And did he make friends? Did he acclimatize?
My brother had a lot of friends from long ago, from Germany. That's why I asked you if you knew Jacobson. He was his best friend, actually. And he had that was in Germany. And then and he had friends from this English time. Yeah, he had lots of friends, my brother.
He went to public school as well? Or did he go
My brother was in yeshiva.
When he came to America?
Oh, he went to Ner Yisrael.
To Ner Yisrael?
Mm-hmm. My father sent him. He said that it was a type of yeshiva that was a little less chamur, and he didn't want him to be so, what shall I say, so extreme. And I think it was a good place for him at the time. Yeah.
And your parents, were they happy in America?
Yeah, I think so. After they settled in, yeah.
Do you remember ever meeting the great Rabbonim, Reb Moshe Feinstein?
Well, did I meet Rabbi Feinstein? I don't think so. But I knew about him. My husband knew about him. My husband consulted him on many cases. And I knew of Yaakov Kamenetsky personally, yeah.
And living in Washington Heights, it was a very German Jewish area.
Yeah, it was very good for us, very good.
And between your family, did you speak about your experiences? Or did your father speak about when he was in Sponshan and your brother?
And you know, it occurs to me I never asked. I'm sorry about many things that I didn't ask people. I mean, I don't know, for instance, anything about my in-laws' past. I didn't ask. I didn't ask my husband. He didn't tell me, and so I don't know anything. It's a shame. I know more about my father's side of the family because I visited my father's side of the family. And as you say, I never asked my brother, really, how he felt being alone, etc. I never asked him. Don't ask me why that is. But I see my children today. They don't ask me anything. They know a lot about me because I talk. But unlike my parents, who didn't talk, I do talk. But
could you speak with your friends? Did they ask you about what was it like being in Germany? Or did they know that you were a refugee from Germany?
My friends were mostly in the same boat as I was.
But did you discuss with each other about?
We just took life as it was, you know. We didn't...
And
I mean, I was 12 when I arrived in America. At the age of 12, you don't do that. Who would want to hear about your problems or how it was for you? And everybody else. I told you I was in this class. And those are the people that I grew up with, so to say. In the teen years, they were all refugees. They all had a story to tell.
And Hadassa, what happened to the family, your father's family and your mother's family that were in Poland? Do you know what happened to the fates of the family? Did any survive?
Oh, I do know about their being murdered. I think that out of my mother's, there were a total of 7 daughters. So my mother and one other sister were saved, and the others were all murdered. My father had 3 brothers in addition to himself. So he and another brother were saved and 2 were murdered. And the families were wiped out. So there wasn't really much left to talk about, you know. I don't remember having too many cousins as I grew up. So, you know, my mishpacha is now mine, that I made together with my husband.
And can I ask, Hadassa, during the war years, did you know what was going on in Europe?
Oh yeah, we had the radio on all the time. But we were already in America.
But did you know about the extermination camps in Auschwitz?
No, you didn't really know about it until the papers were really reluctant. They had news. They knew something, and they didn't want to plant. They said it's not possible. And you've read about that, I'm sure. There was, it's not like we are very much liked as Jews. Jews are not liked.
Even the New York Times buried many of the stories.
Even in that time in America, there were a lot of, Roosevelt was the one who decided to declare war, but the people were not really for him. They were isolationists, and they didn't really want to be involved in the European war. But in the end, as you see, we saved England from going under. I'm just now watching a series on Netflix. I don't know if you know what that is, called Churchill. And I'm sitting there at the edge of my seat because it's my time. It's like when they showed The Crown, which was Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth. I said, I lived through that. I know all about that because I read all about it when it was happening in real time. When she was crowned, I was already grown around and I knew all about it. And she was really only 3/4 of a year older than I, so it was like following me in a way, And the same was true of Churchill and the World War II. It was all my time.
Do you remember when the rabbis marched in Washington? The very famous march when the rabbis, they went to Washington and they had the march in Washington?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You mean the Russian Jewry thing?
No. During the war, when the rabbis marched in Washington to give a petition to Roosevelt, and he didn't,
to bomb the trains, you mean?
To do something to help the Yidden.
Yeah.
And
I don't remember that there was a march. I guess there was. But I do remember the Russian Jews, to free the Russian Jews, that I remember. I was part of.
But during the war years, did you know a little bit what was going on in Europe? The fate of the Jews in Europe?
We began to know in 1943, I guess. 1943.
And when your parents finally found out about the fate, it must have been devastating.
Yeah, very, very, very. But we did that. We discussed it at the table, and we tried. And my father tried everything to help. And after the war, that's when we first found out that there was this one uncle that stayed alive. And then my mother found out that she had a sister that stayed alive after the war, not before. Yeah. Well, it was a Holocaust. What can I say? That's all you have to say about that. Yeah. I thought we had already. This is my parents in America already. My parents and me. I think I'm in Fort Tryon Park.
These are just wonderful pictures.
This is the wedding. I got married to Norman Horowitz.
And how did you meet your husband?
I'm not going to talk about it. It's too long.
Your husband was American?
Canadian.
And his family, did they have any connections with the Shoah from Europe?
They were in Canada before the Shoah, long before the Shoah. Their parents, that I do know. I think maybe even 1920
and
they were there.
This is your father-in-law?
Yes. Father-in-law. It says 1956.
And where were you married?
I was married in Manhattan, in the Brewster Hotel.
And the shul, do you remember the Rav or any of the Rabbanim?
Okay, so Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky was the Masada Kedushin. Yes.
It's a big schut.
It is. And Benjamin Kamenetsky, Rav Benjamin Kamenetsky, was an aide because he was a very good friend of my husband's. What have you got here? Oh, all right. This is my cousin Dovet. This is my cousin Monique. This is my mother, Olea Shalom. And this is my brother, Olea Shalom. Love Hashalom.
Here's a lovely picture of your...
This is my brother Eli, together with my oldest grandson, Avrumi. This is my husband and me. It says here 1986, so it's not even that long ago, relatively.
And when did you come to Israel?
1986.
In 86.
This must have been part of our goodbye party or something. I don't know.
And Hadassa, are you happy that you made Aliyah, that you came to Israel?
Yes, I'm very happy. I always wanted to come.
And having been here in 39, and then when you came many years later, you must have seen such a transformation.
No comparison. No comparison. No. No. Unbelievable, actually. Yes. Well, never mind that. From the time I arrived now, in 86, to now, 24.
It's amazing.
It's not the same Yerushalayim. I'm talking now strictly Yerushalayim. They're building all over. It's just incredible the amount of building they're doing.
And your brother, did he come here as well?
My brother was here in 73, just around 72, during the Yom Kippur War. And then he, I think in about 75, he went back to America. And then when I came, then he said, oh, I'm going to come if my sister came. And he came again.
And your parents?
No, my parents were not zoche to come. No. 86, none of my parents, not my parents and not my husband's parents, they were not alive anymore. No. So, I mean...
And your
my mother passed away in 81, so I no longer had a feeling that I can't go. Yeah.
And Hadassa, if I have to ask you, what message do you give to your children and grandchildren and to the future generations? Because you have seen momentous times. You've seen the best and you've seen the tragedies, but you've seen the rebirth of the country. You're eyewitness to before the country was established and after.
That is correct.
And you were eyewitness in Germany, in Berlin.
A message to my family. I don't like giving messages because they really don't do a job. They are just spoken words. And all I could do with a message is say how I feel. I would like to direct my family into being religiously good Jews and politically pro-Israel in every way, and morally upstanding human beings. And they should all raise and build a bayis ne'eman be'eretz Israel. But those are words, and people, oh dear, people will do whatever they want to do. I'm just hopeful that the message will get through. All righty.
So I just want to thank you so much. Hadassa, this has been, there are no words. There really are no words to say thank you. It's been...
Oh, you...
I could just come in the picture
here.
to thank you. Hadassa, really, I am extremely grateful to you. We had your beautiful apartment in Hanover, and it's just been listening to miracles. I think your story, it's just full of miracles, how you survived and how the family survived.
That's true.
And how, as an intact family, how your brother, Rabbi Schoenfeld, this is Jewish history.
It is true.
You've lived Jewish history.
Yes.
You've lived the worst and the best.
That is true. That is true.
And that you are the ultimate survivor. It's just amazing.
Yes.
But I want to thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you.
Maybe you should say who you are.
They know.
No,
but
they would like to know, I think, who did all this.
They must just know that I am so grateful to you. And there are no words to express my appreciation. And I think you are remarkable. You are something.
Thank you very
You should
much.
just have nachas and mazel and bracha.
Thank you very much. You too.
If we could just ask you for a blessing for all of us.
Yes, okay.
Thank you so much.
You are very welcome. You are very welcome.
Hadassa, can I just ask, have you ever been back to Germany?
No,
Would you ever go back?
no.
And in your home, did you have any German goods, or was that also difficult to drive a German car or German goods?
That was the case a while. There was such a time, especially here. There was a big debate about it, actually. But the way I understood it, that we were at one time actually benefiting a great deal from Germany. Goods they gave us for a lower tariff, etc. So that I didn't really feel that I was betraying anything by having German goods. But the German goods, pretty soon the market turned out to be that what you bought was Japanese goods, or now we are left with Chinese goods. So it's not even a question anymore. I know that musicians didn't want to play Mahler, for instance. I don't know if that is...
Or Wagner. Wagner was...
Right. I don't know if it's a fruitful stand to take. You don't in any way, you're not giving money to Mahler anymore or Wagner. It's not as if he benefits by you playing it, and if the music strikes you as so great, then why should you deprive yourself? So I don't feel particularly, no, I don't feel that I have to do that, no.
And lastly, but it has been, I could go on and on, but you saw, and we all thought never again, after what we went through and after all the revelations of all the atrocities, and now we see from October...
You are touching on a very painful spot, because when I first saw what was happening after October 7th and the anti-Semitism that you saw springing up from the earth, you might say, from all corners of the world, places where Jews didn't even live. I was very sad, very unhappy, because really I saw a replay of 1938. And I'm very concerned, really. I'm very concerned. But anti-Semitism has been with us since Yaakov and Esau. And it looks like it will never go away. And I imagine that once we finish successfully to deal with our enemies here, and we won't be in the papers every minute of the day, it'll calm down again. It won't be so prominent. But it's very sad when you think about it, after all the Jewish people have gone through, that we have this response when we're only trying to defend ourselves. Very sad.
Hadassa, thank you so much.